My name is Antonio Stewart, and I'm a mortgage and finance broker. I joined the industry in 1982, April 1982. So coming up, I've now done 34 years and moving towards 35 years in the industry. As you'll imagine, having been in the industry that time, even though when I started in the industry, there were no qualifications required or mandatory qualifications at that time. However, since then, the rules have changed and regulation has become part of the industry. So I hold the relevant qualifications as a financial advisor from the Chartered Institute of Insurers. I also hold the relevant qualifications from the Institute of Financial Services as a mortgage advisor. So I started in the industry as a personal financial advisor, and I also then spent this industry. I have a client bank, and all my business comes to me through referrals. I've never actually advertised in the industry, so I've never advertised for business. So my purpose in being here and on the other stations that have welcomed me on board is to see how I can share the 34 years experience that I have to assist the community to become more aware of financial matters and feel more empowered by being somewhat more, perhaps a little bit more financially literate. And I appreciate that there'll be a variety of listeners out there, and there'll be a variety of different levels of knowledge of financial matters. So forgive me if at any time what I'm saying is things that you already know, but I'm obviously not aware of who the listeners are and what their knowledge base is. So I like to pride myself in making what is seemingly by a large proportion of the general public has been complicated. My goal is to attempt to impart information and knowledge in a straightforward and accessible way, without complication, without acronyms, and without industry jargon. As Brother Dougie has said, the lines will be open shortly, and you'll be able to ring in with questions. Thought, based on some of the feedback that we got last time, Dougie, that what we'll do this afternoon is spend a bit of time around one of the main challenges at the present time for the public at large is around the first-time buyer area. And hopefully I can bring some new thinking to, or make people aware of some of what's out there to assist with first-time buying. It is a challenging time, and just to perhaps put it into context, the challenges that are facing first-time buyers today, and a definition of a first-time buyer, by the way, is because we tend to think of first-time buyers being somebody who's buying a property for the first time. But in actuality, where lenders are concerned, a first-time buyer can also be anyone who's owned a property, sold it, and not actually had an active mortgage for the last 12 months. Okay. And in some instances, it might be even as long as 24 months. If they haven't had a mortgage in 24 months, then they will be treated as being a first-time buyer. The challenge specifically within the Greater London area is that property prices at the present time, and this might shock you a little bit, Dougie, is that the average flat in London is about 490,000. 490. For the average flat across London. Of course, this is an average, so there are still parts of Greater London, and when I say Greater London, one has to understand it to be Zone 5 and beyond, to use the zoning system. And the average terraced house in London at the present time stands at about 625,000 as an average. In this part of London, it's actually more like about 800,000 for the average terraced house. Okay, and the average, to give you an idea how different London is in property prices, prices outside of Greater London area, the average house price is about 230,000.
230,000.
So it's a huge difference. And of course, with those prices, as I've just said, as average prices in London, this throws up the challenge of how does one save, acquire, accumulate, and get a deposit. Even 5% of those prices is quite a substantial amount of money.
That's why a lot of people, they're shipping out, innit? They're coming out of London,
this is part of it.
Yeah.
There is and is likely to be a bit of an exodus of people leaving London, which is obvious based on the figures. Because I've just said, if you're looking at an average 3-bedroom house, an average house outside of Greater London being 230,000, and I was speaking to somebody from Birmingham just over the weekend, and they're saying 120 grand they can buy themselves a detached 4-bedroom house. So it's a huge difference to London. I'm not saying everybody should en masse leave London. What I'm saying is that it is important to think about this thing of how to get on the property market a little different to we did in the past. In the past, it was just about raising a deposit. The reality is that there is no such thing as a 100% mortgage any longer. So at the very minimum that anyone will need when looking to buy a property for the first time is going to be a 5% deposit. However, again, not to be overlooked, it's very important to also remember that you've got to have funds over and above a deposit for things such as stamp duty, legal fees, valuation fees. These are things that I will explain. I shouldn't say legal fees, legal costs, because quite often legal fees do the solicitors a disservice in people think that they're making more money than it is actually accurate. Legal costs include the solicitor's fee, VAT, but there are also mandatory costs that the solicitor has to incur on your behalf, and they're all included, so you get an all-income inclusive figure, but people tend to think all of that's going to the solicitor and think, well, that's all of the money. That's not the case. The money has to be used for a variety of different things. So it's important to bear that in mind. It's also very, very important, not only as a first-time buyer, but anyone who's looking to do any kind of financial transaction, to seek out and find an independent financial advisor or an independent mortgage broker. And bear in mind that banks and building societies are not there to give you advice. They're there to sell you a product or a service. And this is a commonly made mistake in the, I'm going to go and see the advisor at the bank. Well, the advisor at the bank, whilst they can give you some generalized knowledge in a way, and I'm not doing them a disservice because they do hold the same qualifications as the rest of us. But of course, if they're working for a particular bank and not wishing to advertise any particular bank or single out any particular bank or building society, if they're working for a particular bank or building society, then it's common sense states that the products and services that they're talking about are for that particular bank. They're not at liberty to say to you, well, actually, if you step next door to so-and-so bank or building society, you can get a better deal, okay? Because their job's at risk. So they're not in a position to do that. So this is why you need to see an independent mortgage broker when dealing with mortgages and when dealing with personal financial matters, to seek out and find a obviously qualified independent financial advisor. We all hold mandatory qualifications these days, and we are all regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, dependent on what the services and products are that we provide. We have what's called permissions from the Financial Conduct Authority. To put that into perspective, the Financial Conduct Authority is the top regulator in the country. They regulate every bank, building society, insurance company. Anything to do with personal and finance is regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. So it's not some Mickey Mouse organization that I'm referencing. This is the same person that regulates me, regulates the bank on the high street. It's the same organization. My permissions to do what I do come from the same organization that regulates amongst those institutions. So it's absolutely essential to understand that if you want somebody who can look at the whole of the market in any of these situations, personal finance or on mortgages, is to see an independent individual.
Yeah. Let me just ask a question.
Sure.
Because and it's really giving some advice to some, especially young people now who are looking to buy their home, right? So say someone in their 20s, you know, they've got they're married and they probably have a child and so forth, right? And they come to you, right, for some advice. What advice would you give them in terms of really putting them on? Because, like I said, we don't want to go to the bank because they're not really there to give you the proper advice. But what advice would you give to a couple of young people in their 20s? You know, 'cause a lot of people looking at the buy property and so forth.
That's a very broad question because the way we work is that when somebody contacts and comes to see us, is that the first thing that a reputable advisor is going to do is do what we call a fact find. So they're going to spend a couple of hours with you, finding out what your situation is now, and completing that into a document that they will hold on file. So they want to find out your current financial commitments, your goals and ambitions and dreams, and also and with that information, then they will start to look to see how they can assist you to achieve your outcome and your objective. So that we've got an agreed place that we're working from as to what. There's not an assumption on the advisor's part or on my part. We're working from a document that has been through a couple of hours of conversation, noted down the key elements and the baseline information that's needed, such as date of birth, occupation, salaries, etc. Those sort of things. But it's not just about that. It's what's the goals, ambitions, and objectives as well. So those things are included in there as well to see how the outcome required can take place. We're looking at a 20-year couple in their early 20s, how we're going to move things forward. Let me just take it back a step. We're now at a place where, in terms of we're almost at a place where it was when I got my first mortgage some 40 years ago. And that is, in those days, believe it or not, you had to save with a bank or building. Well, in actual fact, banks didn't do mortgages in those days. Banks only started doing residential mortgages since the 90s, when the regulation was changed. Prior to that, the only people who did mortgages were building societies for residential homes, and you had to save with a building society. You had to demonstrate that you could save on a regular basis. So with some societies, you might have to save for 2 years before you can even go in and have a conversation about getting a mortgage. And you had to go and meet the building society manager, and the building society manager would interview you, and based on your saving record and the interview with the manager would determine whether you'd get the mortgage or not. Because in those days, that particular manager had the authority to put his signature to and commit that building society to lending you £10,000. And I know that sounds low, but that's what it was 40 years ago. That's the sort of mortgages we're talking about. So they had that discretion, as it's called, to be able to do that. So in a way, we've come full circle. Whilst you haven't got to necessarily meet with a building society manager and convince him as to why you're a good risk and you should get the money, we've got a place now through regulation where in reality you've got to spend some time preparing yourself to be able to go and buy a property. Right.
When you say preparing yourself, in terms of what do you mean?
I'm going to explain that to you now. So whereas just a short while ago, 2008, 2009, you could go out today, Dougie, you could say, oh boy, I see a beautiful property around the corner, I want to buy that property. You could ring me in San Antonio, I found a property. I could say to you, Dougie, come and see me tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock and I can sort a mortgage out for you. Yeah, those days aren't there anymore because of regulation and changes that have come in over the last few years as a consequence of the last crash and the recession. So they've put in place regulation now where building societies, banks and building societies, or mortgage lenders, because there are mortgage lenders that are not on the high street but are completely legit, but they're what are called centralized lenders who only lend via intermediaries like myself, brokers like myself.
Okay then.
So rules have been brought in that govern those guys as to how they can go about lending to the public directly or through brokers. So some of the things is they have to be seen to be lending responsibly. They have to be seen to be treating customers fairly, including the brokers. We have to also, and they also have to be seen that whatever lending they're doing is plausible and serviceable. Serviceable being the key word, that is serviceable. They're not committing you to borrowings that in truth you can't afford. Yeah, so that's the key one, serviceable. So in preparation, what people should now be doing is, and I mentioned last time, first thing they need to do is go online, go to equifax.co.uk and Experian.co.uk, two completely separate organisations, but these are the two key credit agencies in the UK that keep a financial profile of virtually every adult in the country. Yeah. And that financial profile is the first thing that lenders will look at when they are seeking to borrow. Even a credit card, they'll look at the same information, and this information is held on centralized computers, and the information on there in regards to your commitments are there on a 6-yearly cycle. So that's how it works. So anything that's over 6 years old that is not ongoing falls off of your credit file. Now the key thing that is a big issue in our community is you must register to vote. You must register to vote. The fact that you don't vote, or let me put it the other way, the fact that you're registered to vote, voting in this country is not compulsory, unlike, say, Australia. Right. But what it does is whenever you're looking at financial matters, a lender will do a search on you. The first thing they're looking for, are you registered on the register for voting at the address that you say you're living at? Okay. If you're not, then you start creating additional challenges for yourself, because they will want to be able to track who you are and where you've lived for the last 3 years. So if you're not registered to vote at the address you say you're living at, and you weren't registered at the address previous to where you're living at now, you then get into a situation where you've got to prove it, and the way you've got to prove it is by way of bank statements or utility bills, and you could be asked to go back and provide them for 3 years. So don't make life any more difficult than it already is. Just go and register to vote with the local authority. A lot of them has now got what you call rolling registration. You can go on the website, or you can contact them, get a form from them and register almost any time of the year. All of them seek to renew the registration September, October of each year.
So the reason why it's important, as the brother said, to register to vote, that it just for their perspective, to make sure that you're the person say you are really.
It validates you. It validates you, and it validates that you exist.
There's no more register to vote, so you are on vote. Yeah, right. That's not the argument, you know. Yeah, it's just to validate you. That's how it is.
That I am Antonio Stewart, and I do live at the address that I said I've lived at. So immediately, so that's in terms of credit score and credit worthiness, that's the first thing, the first step in preparing. So the first step in preparing to look for a mortgage, even as a first-time buyer or a second-time buyer, is to get a copy of your credit file from the two organizations that I've just said. Familiarize yourself with it and understand how it works. And in terms of making sure that profile is in good shape, the first step is to make sure that you're registered to vote. From there, the next thing to do is also make sure that any commitments that you've got, even a phone on contract, make sure that that's paid in full and on time each month, regardless of the amount. Because I've had people who say, "Chow, it's only a mobile phone, man. It's only £15 a month. Somebody pay that when we're ready." Yeah, that's all well and good, but that's recorded. So that now makes you look like you're either a late payer on a regular basis because every single month you pay the phone bill, or that you miss it and then you pay it in a couple of months in a month's time. All of that's recorded. It's all recorded on your credit file. So now you either look like a late payer or you look like somebody who misses his payments. So you always pay late or you miss your payments. So if you don't pay this month's, but you do pay it the 1st of September, that will be recorded as you missed August. So you've had a missed payment, not just a late payment. So let's say it was supposed to be paid today and you pay it tomorrow. Depending on the company, it will go down as a late payment. If you pay it 1st of September, although they don't cut you off or anything, it will go down as a missed payment for August. These are things that will damage your credit score and damage your opportunity to get a mortgage. So it's very, very important if you've got phone, your car, even utilities these days, make sure they're paid on time. If you haven't got them on standing order, or you haven't got them on direct debit, then make sure that you make your payment in full and on time. And bear in mind with credit cards and some of these things, if your credit card statement says that your payment is due on the 8th, don't pay it on the 8th because it might take 2 days or 3 days to actually hit your account. So it could still be technically deemed to be by a company that wants to be that pedantic, deemed to be a late payment, even though you paid it on the day it was due, but because it didn't hit your account at their end on that day, it can still cause you problems. So pay it, as it says on the back of all of them, pay it 2 days or 3 days before the due date. So it arrives on the due date. This information is there with these things, but we as human beings, tend not to read the small print on the back of the letter they sent you. They just look at the front and look at what has to be paid. So I'm just giving you that insight in that, yes, pay it 2 or 3 days before, make sure it's there on time. Equally, bear in mind the difference between a direct debit and a standing order. A direct debit, once set up, gives the company that it's in favour of the power to come into your account and take money. A standing order, the power to pay it lies with you. So if it is something that's not a varying amount each month, then realistically I would advise you to have a standing order as opposed to a direct debit, because with a standing order, depending on who your bank is, you have some latitude in changing the date. So if you find for some reason your cash flow this month means that you're not actually going to have that 20 quid or that 50 quid or that £100 today the 10th, but you're going to have it on Friday the 12th, you can move the date on the standing order by going online, and when it gets paid out on the 12th on Friday, it's not a missed payment.
So you would advise people to have a standing order?
Let me just correct myself there for a moment. One of the things I should have said earlier on when I was introduced myself, my conversation with the listeners today should not be taken as advice or as recommendations in terms of, it's talking in general terms. You have to do things for your to suit your personal set of circumstances. So nothing I'm saying should be taken as advice, because that's not what I'm seeking to do. I don't know enough about anyone's circumstance to give out advice. So I misused that word. So I take that back and say, you may want to look at and be aware of the difference between direct debits and standing orders, and the flexibility that a standing order gives you that a direct debit doesn't. If a direct debit bounces, most banks are going to charge you £25-30, although I think that's capped now at £12.50 or something of that nature. But they'll charge you for that, and then they'll go back 14 days later and try and recollect. Whereas a standing order, you have some flexibility about how that works, because it's your order to your bank to pay somebody on your behalf.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the first step in terms of, as you were saying, with your young couple in their early 20s, is you must prepare and expect to spend, perhaps in most instances these days, I would say anything from 12 to 24 months to prepare yourself, not just for saving the deposit, but preparing yourself to be able to qualify for a mortgage, because they now look at things such as what commitments do you have on a monthly basis. So yes, it was in the papers when this was introduced in March last year. Silly things like how often do you go to the hairdressers, and they will look at that as a financial commitment, because you spend £50 a month every month on getting your hair done. Well, that's £6,000 a year, £6,600 a year that isn't money that's available to you. They will look at what your phone contracts are, your gym memberships, your subscriptions. All of these things are deemed to be commitments. If you've got a car and you're making monthly payments on it, if you've got credit cards and you're making payments in those, you've got two aspects to a credit card. You've got the monthly commitment and you've got a debt, whatever's outstanding on the card. So again, if we look at that, one would be saying reduce your debts and reduce your monthly outgoing.
That's why you said that from the beginning, that when I do ask you about to young people, then you look at all these commitment they have, and then with that now you can make a evaluation or assessment.
We're obliged by regulation now, and those of us who've been in the industry a long while and were took what we're doing very seriously would have been doing these things before it became guidance through the regulators and through rules and regulations come out of Europe as a consequence of the last crash. So that's where these things are coming from. But in real terms, whilst one can say, well, that all sounds very harsh, very hard, actually it's good sense. It's good sense to actually not be borrowing any more than what you can afford to pay back, because you've got these commitments at this time. So if you don't want to get in your own way of being able to be a buyer and get a mortgage, then you need to spend this time, invest this time preparing for and reducing debt in particular, getting rid of unsecured debts such as credit cards. It's best not to have any. If you can, get rid of them, or at least have them very low. When I say get rid of them, pay them off. Don't get rid of them. You need to have what we call active credit to give your credit file a good credit score. Nobody wants to lend. I say nobody. People don't particularly want to lend to somebody who's never hasn't got a track record of showing that they've borrowed money and pay it back. So it is good to have some active credit, such as a credit card that's got a low limit on it that you use. You spend £100 a month on it. At the end of the month, you clear it every single month. So I'm not talking about going out and getting yourself into £5,000 worth of debt or anything. Just have a credit card that's active, that you pay off, you use it. Maybe you just put your petrol in your car in it, because if you clear it at the end of the month, then you pay no interest on it, so there's no harm in using it for that purpose. So you show that you can manage credit and that you've got some active credit. So that's part of it. So you do need to keep some active credit, but the things that are commitments that aren't going to add to your credit profile, then you should get rid of those. So subscriptions and all of those sort of things, get shot of them, so that you when you're looked at, you've got as much disposable, as we use it, as much disposable income available to you to demonstrate that you can pay your mortgage. So that's part of the preparation, is this profile around your credit file and the things that affect the credit card file and how you can manage that, and this key thing of making sure you're registered to vote. Because that's a big score. That's a big part of how you're scored. So that's preparing yourself. Then it's the case of, well, how do you get this deposit? That's quite a substantial figure these days, and there are a number of schemes available. In essence, virtually all of them require you, even if you're not using a scheme, all mortgage lenders today will require you to at least have a 5% deposit.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some schemes available that are specifically for first-time buyers. Yeah, to assist them with being able to actually get on the marketplace, and they come from different sources. So you've got, if I start nationally, you've got the government who have put in place a couple of schemes, and they are under the heading of the Help to Buy scheme, and I'll come back to that as to the two schemes that exist under that. Then you've got the local authority who do the Right to Buy scheme. So if you are a local authority tenant and you want to buy for the first time, then you might want to look at the feasibility and the possibility of buying that council property that you're in.
Because funny enough, I was talking to someone the other day, and they've been living this particular property for, I think for 30, 40 years, and they got 70% discount of this particular prop. Well, I thought, go for it. I mean, what's it to lose? So I mean, there's like I said, there's a lot of these schemes, general local authority and so forth.
Yeah,
so,
there are schemes out there to assist first-time buyers. So you've got the Help to Buy schemes, which is government-backed. Then you've got the Right to Buy scheme, which is local authority-backed, and ultimately the government. And then you've got, with the housing associations, you've got shared ownership. So there are three ways in which you can get involved in the marketplace that perhaps some of the listeners will not be aware of. The Help to Buy scheme in particular, a lot of a lot of the listeners are possibly not aware of that. Right to Buy, I'd imagine a lot of people are aware of that, and shared ownership, a lot of people are perhaps aware of that, but don't know how they work. So which is what I'm going to touch on shortly.
Let me just jump in there. So, as we're saying, you have these couple young people, not even young people, I'd say, first-time buyers, right? And you have certain schemes, where organizations will assist you in terms of buying for the first time. But what they have to offer, is there something? Is there advantage, or I just want to know?
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. As with everything in life, there are disadvantages and advantages of everything. Yeah.
All right.
And
I think it's very good for people to have to know.
And with the time allotted to us, it's not possible to go into all the pros and cons.
Yes.
But I will always say to people, and I always present to my clients, these are the pros and cons of these options that are available to you. My approach to my clients is for them to make an informed decision. So I provide them with information on the options available to them, and then I show them the pros and cons of each option and allow them to make a decision. So it's not something that can readily be gone into in this sort of situation, what the pros and cons are, because part of that is also one's perspective as to how you look at it. So if we look at the Help to Buy scheme in terms of, if we look at all the schemes briefly as to what's the positives about them, they're there to decide. They're there and designed to try and assist you to become a property owner.
Right.
Yeah, that's the first thing.
Right.
Yeah. Apart from the Right to Buy, you don't need to have a deposit with the Right to Buy.
You don't need to have a deposit.
So let me deal with that one first.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't need to have a deposit. You need to have been a council tenant for at least 3 years, and that's with most of, because what you have centralised rules about what the scheme is from central government, and then you've got local authorities who vary the rules a little bit in between. So it can be slightly different from one borough to another. So again, just reiterating, I'm speaking generally. Most of them, you have to be a tenant for at least 3 years. That 3 years doesn't necessarily have to be 3 years back to back. As long as you've been a tenant for 3 years with a local authority, you can apply for the property that you're in at this time for the Right to Buy. And that will, again, depend on how long you've been a tenant, etc., will dictate what your discount is. So in most instances these days, the discount is capped. when it was first introduced back in the 80s, it was a percentage of the value of the property, up to as high as 75% was the discount when this was first introduced back in the 80s. Yeah, but now what they've said is they've put a monetary limit on it, so it's a maximum of, and again, as I say, you need to check with your own local authority, but it averages around the 75,000, £100,000 as the maximum discount that you can get. The challenge with that is, let's take an example. If the flat or property that you're in or house that you're in is valued, just for nice round figures, 300,000, and they're giving you £100,000 discount, so you've got to buy, you're buying at 200,000. You've got to come up with a mortgage of 200,000.
200,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the fact that you're getting a nice fat discount doesn't necessarily mean you can buy it, because you've still got to be able to demonstrate to a mortgage lender that you have sufficient income to pay for the size of the mortgage that you're going to have on the property. So in my example, if you're going to have a £200,000 mortgage, you're going to have either singularly or jointly income in and around £50,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So a gentleman at the weekend at the event we were at approached me, said he'd had the right to buy. He'd seen something on his rent statement about being able to get a £100,000 discount. Spoke to his local authority. No, didn't speak to local authority. Spoke to me at the weekend at the event we was at.
I think it's the same guy. Same 20%.
Well, let's not make it too personal.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
Somebody say something. So I wanted the same person you heard it. Yeah.
Exactly as I've just said. That was the example I gave to him. So, not wishing. I'm here to be as positive as I possibly can. I'm very much a can-do, solution-orientated individual. How do we get things done?
Right.
What's the solution?
Right.
So, with this gentleman, again, as I said, on that scenario, you need around about £50,000 as an income, and that's very broad brush speaking, because the way you're assessed for a mortgage these days is very much around affordability, what the lender believes you can afford to spend per month on a mortgage. So
it's the
lender makes that decision based on your financial information. The gentleman only earned £22,000 a year. So, of course, that means that the likelihoods of him, because that's looking at nearly 10 times his income for him to be able to get a mortgage of 200,000, and there aren't lenders out there who would commit to that kind of situation today. Right. So, I gave him some ideas as to how he might be able to make it still possible. So, such as if he's got adult children who have got a good credit file, who are working and are willing to, if they're not living at home, to move back home, live with him and become part of the tenancy. Actually go on the tenancy agreement that he has with the local authority, so that when the actual right to buy documentation is issued, it's issued to him and that child jointly, so the property will be bought jointly. So that's just one of the ways, without getting bogged down, and also wanting to give some time to make sure listeners can call in and have some conversation. So that's dealing very quickly with right to buy. The government schemes, help to buy, are basically two schemes. One is what's called an equity scheme, which is where you as the buyer have to have a 5% deposit, and the government will lend you 20%. So you in effect have a 25% deposit, and the mortgage company is only lending you 75% of the value of the property. So just to put that into, hang some figures on that, if you were buying at 100,000, I'm great with a calculator, but in my head I like nice round easy figures. So 100,000, 5% would be £5,000. So you've got to have £5,000 of your own money. The lender will, the government will then do 20%. So they're going to give you a further, what is that, 20,000? 20,000, yeah. And then the 25. So that's 25,000, and then the lender is going to do 75%. Okay, so that gives you 100%. That's how the figures are made up.
Okay.
There's no interest charged on the 20,000 lent to you by the government for the first 5 years. After that, then they will take a share of any. They will either charge interest or they will take a share of the profits when the property is sold. Not all. It's both. They charge a very low interest rate, and if you sell the property in 10 years' time, they take 20% of the profit because they invested 20%. The government, because they invested 20% on your behalf, so they get 20% of the profit. So if you make a £10,000 profit, they get £2,000, you get £8,000. Yeah, that's how it works. So that's an equity loan. The other one is that they do is called a mortgage guarantee. Same scenario. Let's take the 100,000. You have to come up as the buyer with 5%, £5,000. The government then says to the mortgage company, right, what we will do is we will guarantee you that if this person fails to pay the mortgage, we will guarantee to repay you up to £20,000 of the money that you lend them. So if the lender is going to lend 95% in this instance, the government says 20,000 of that 90,000 that you're lending is insured by us, the government. If this all goes horribly wrong, you've got to repossess the property and you've got to sell it and you make a loss, anything up to 20,000 we will guarantee to pay you back, Mr. Lender. So it's a mortgage guarantee. They're guaranteeing the mortgage company that they will compensate that mortgage company with up to 20%, i.e. in the example I'm giving, £20,000 if that property was repossessed and sold at a loss for the lender. So that's the government Help to Buy scheme. They're available through specialists. Forgive me, those can only be used, the first one, the equity deal, can only be used on new build properties. They have to be newly built properties where you're buying directly from the developer. Yeah, the mortgage guarantee is available to anyone who's buying a newly built property or a second-hand property. And the rules in London are a little bit different in that they will go up to 40% in London, whereas it's 20% outside of London. Yeah.
Well, see, we have a brother who deals with the science of property inside his place, man, listen to him, and well, we have to give thanks to you, my brother. We have to give thanks to you. In fact, what we're going to do, and just look on the time here.
Yeah, time running, so let's see if there's any questions out there.
So if anybody wants to phone in and ask a specific question, feel free.
Lines on? Lines open?
Yeah, lines open, man. Lines open.
Okay, great.
So if people want to phone in and ask a specific question, feel free to do that. The live link number is 07960 239-493. I repeat, 07960-239-493. So anybody wants to ask a question, feel free, because I imagine people taking notes and probably want to ask a specific question, And I said the brother is here to talk about all thing about property and all thing about if you're a first-time buyer, and so much things you need to look into, especially into buying and so forth. And like the brother said, one of the things you got to do is prepare. Prepare. Well, it's very, very important because obviously, if these people are going to give you money, one knows that you're reliable, you're evaluated, is what I'm saying, and that makes sense, So there's a lot of things goes into this, your thing about buying and so forth,
And I felt it was important to mention those because it's all well and good you knuckle down, you save the money, and then you get to the lender, and the lender turns you down. So you've saved the money over a 2-year period, for argument's sake. You go to a lender or you go to a broker, and then when the broker looks in the marketplace and they find a product and they do a search on you or look at your credit file for you because you've never looked at it. Me, these days, the first thing I do with any client is, please get me your Experian and your Equifax files. That's the first thing I want to do, is to see your credit profile, because that's the first thing the lender's going to look at. So I start there. So get that, and then if you then spend 2 years saving, you've saved £20,000, you're going to go out and get get involved and try and buy something, and then you find, because you didn't pay your mobile phone regularly through last year, all of a sudden you've got the money, but you can't get the mortgage. So this is why I've taken the time to explain the importance of and getting familiar with Experian and Equifax and making sure that you're checking it on a regular basis. And they will give you tips on those websites as to how to maintain and improve your credit profile and your credit file, and that's all free on their website. And you can, by the way, also you can there's a statutory fee of just £2 that you can pay, and they'll send it to you through the post within 7 days. Or you can just get yourself involved in their 30-day free trial, so you can immediately access your credit file, and you can do that as many times as you want in 30 days, and as long as you cancel before the 30th day, it hasn't cost you a penny. So you can do that on both sites. It's down to you. I would say it's worthwhile at least having the baseline subscription with each of them, especially if you're preparing to buy, so you can see on a monthly basis what's going on with your credit file, because also errors are made. Things are recorded on your credit file in error, and you don't want to wait until the day you're actually trying to get your mortgage to then find that there's a problem and you're trying to sort it out. My own son, somebody tried to clone him because his flat was in a building where there was a communal space where the post went. Somebody stole some of his post and then tried to clone him, and it took him clone is to steal his identity.
That's what called clone, yeah?
Yes, cloning him to steal his identity. It took him over 6 months to get it all sorted out and locked down in a way that whoever was attempting to do this was locked out of his life. It took him 6 months to get it sorted.
6 months?
6 months, yeah. So now he has alerts. Anything happens on his credit file, he gets a text or an email.
Right.
So he has those in place. So you have to be mindful that there are people who will try to do stuff using your identity as well. So it's important to have this, so you look at it at least every month. This is where you heard me before talking about investing time in ourselves, investing time to become aware and understand how these things work. And it's not a lot of time. It's just realizing that if you want to get on in this world, there are systems, and we have to invest in time in learning the systems. And as with anything, if you want to go out and play football or hockey, you have to learn the rules.
Yes, true.
Yeah? So if you want to win the football game, you can't just win if you're breaking all the rules. Same thing go with hockey. Yeah, you have to learn the rules. Same thing with basketball or netball. You have to learn the rules, and you play within the rules, you can win, and you can come out on top. If you want to try and buck the rules, no matter how many goals you score, the referee's still going to tell you lose.
It's true.
So that's all I'm saying. Invest a bit of time. It's important to invest some time in understanding these things. You don't have to become a master. There's simple things you can do that will keep you in a place where your life will be simple when it comes to financial matters, and there's simple things that you can mess up that will cause you a whole heap of grief and a whole heap of aggravation, and will mean that when you want to do something, you're refused.
Okay, but I mean, I totally agree 100%. So, but the question would be, if someone wants to understand the basics, rules, or is there a book that you can recommend, or go online and just
forgive me, there aren't any books as such that I'd recommend, but in terms of when it comes to financial matters, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I brought along, you can see here, Brother Dougie, I brought along 2 newspapers. Yeah, one is the Daily Mail and one is the Daily Express. And if you want to start becoming aware of personal financial matters and what's going on, is just buy these papers on a Wednesday. Right. Because on a Wednesday, they both have a money section. And and they cover general public financial matters in a way that is easily understood and accessed. And in the mail, it's called, as you can see there, Brother Dougie, the Money Mail. Every single week. This is what I used to read when I started out in the industry 34 years ago. Not just my training, but I used to read these things so I could speak to people in language that they'll understand, and to actually acquire information, broaden my depth of knowledge on these things. So as you can see here, you know, this 100,000 pension that won't even buy you fish or supper. Cynical banks use rate cut to squeeze savers, which is referring to the Bank of England rate cut this week. Why fix is best for mortgages. Tiny error on travel insurance cover form that cost Peter £36,000. You can see here Best Buy variable rate savings accounts. So it shows you what the best savings accounts are offering at the present time. Yeah, you've got, and I know because I looked earlier. Is it this one? Could be the other one. Barclaycard PPI dealing with, and in the mail, that's the mail. In the Express, let me just take a moment. I was looking earlier. I picked these up today specifically for the show. And if I can just turn to the relevant pages. Where was it in this one? Gone too far, Dougie. I'm going to come back as well because there you go. So in this section, look at that. You've got a whole page. Best savings, mortgages and personal finance deals. All listed. All in a nice little table. So first time buyer mortgages, who the providers are, what the rates are, etc. Variable rates for term mortgages, short-term fixed rate mortgages, long-term fixed rate mortgages. This information is readily available. It's readily available. What one has to do, and what did it cost me? It's 55p for the Daily Express and 65p for the Mail. So it cost me.
So this comes out on
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
These are daily papers, but both of them do this particular section on a Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one way in which you can get some of the knowledge I'm talking about. Of course, these days with the internet, every question you can think up, you can Google the answer, and you can find the help necessary out there. There is a website set up by the government called the Money Advice Service, MAS. There's adverts on telly all the time, MAS, Money Advice Service. It covers everything, absolutely everything. So there really is no excuse today in terms of knowing how to play the game and preparing yourself. But the key place is if you do find it overwhelming and you do find it difficult, and even if you go on these websites and you get information, it's not the same as speaking to someone like myself with the depth of experience and knowledge that we have, because the websites can't deal with the individual circumstances. It can give you broad brush general information, but it can't deal with the individual circumstances. So that's what coming to myself for a financial advisor gives you, that individual connection who can look at your circumstances and have points of reference in their memory banks. Oh yeah, I've had somebody similar in similar set of circumstances. This is what I did in that situation. So that's a little bit about that. But also, so I don't forget, is whilst I've looked at the sort of schemes that might be available to help, is also what can you do to help save that deposit at this time? Because if you're working, living away from home, paying rent and paying the utilities that go with it, savings, it comes pretty low down the priority list. So one of the things is actually, as a first step, is if it's possible, move back home. If you're young and not living at home, move back home. Now appreciate that you might be living with your partner, and it's whether it's practical based on cultural and religious beliefs, whether it's practical to be able to move back home as a couple under your mum and dad's roof or under your partner's mum and dad's roof. So I appreciate what I'm saying has potentially some challenges, but consider it and look at it, because instead of you're spending £7,000, £8,000, £9,000 a month in rent and more in certain parts of London, £1,500 a month in rent between on your own or between you, if you go back home, not saying live, sponge off your parents and live after them, contribute something, at least pay the council tax or something, don't just sponge off them, contribute something. But let's say you're paying £1,500 a month in rent, and you go home and you give mum and dad 500 quid, you're saving £1,000 a month. That's £12,000 a year that you're saving, and if you can do that jointly, you can rack up and save money pretty rapidly. So sometimes, you have to take a step backwards in order to go forwards, and me suggesting maybe moving back home might be deemed to be a step backwards. I don't see it that way. I see it as you've got to do what is necessary in order to be able to advance yourself for your goal. Simon Cowell went bankrupt and went back home to live with his mum and dad. Simon Cowell's now worth the best part of £250 million, 250 million or something. He owns a phantom Rolls Royce in London, and he keeps one in America. That's 500 grand just in the £1 million just in the two cars, right? So going back home is not the worst thing you can do. Yes, there may be some rules and regulations that you have to adhere to. It's not for the rest of your life. It's 12 months, 24 months. Bite your tongue, live accordingly, save your money so you can go and do what it is you want to achieve. Stay focused on the goal as opposed to the little things that you have to give up at the moment. So that's one of the things to do, is in a way of making it easier for you to save. Of course, if you're a couple and you're living separately and both paying rent for renting apartments, look at moving in together. So you're only paying one rent per month. Look at that as a possible. So some of these might sound like, come on, Antonio, are you really saying that on here? In truth, it's often people fail to see the obvious. Fail to see the obvious. So just think around those things as well. Of course, also, there are those who are out there that I'm aware of who are living in what we call houses of multiple occupation, where they're renting a room. And that room, I was looking at something just day before yesterday for somebody who's buying a place in New Cross, and he buys them and he rents them out room by room. One room is £150 a week in New Cross. So, if you've got a couple of mates and you're all doing that, paying 150 quid or 100 quid a week, well, why not consider getting together and buying a place together?
Yeah, it's better to mention that to you.
So you can buy, and there are lenders who will allow friends to buy together, and it varies. Some will say no more than 2, others will say no more than 3, others will say no more than 4. So again, this is where you benefit from coming to see a specialist and a broker, because as I said, if you walk into one of the high streets and they say, no, I can't do that for you, mate, can't do for individuals buying together who are just friends, they're not going to tell you that the guy, the lender 2 doors along, will do it. They may not even know that they'll do it. So we will know that.
So why they wouldn't do that? I think you mentioned that last time you was here.
Well, it's not in their interest. They're there to represent, for argument's sake, the Halifax. They're not going to tell you that what they're telling you can't do there, that Santander will do it.
No, but what I'm saying, why wouldn't they make 4 people club together and
it's just their criteria.
Okay.
They're concerned. If it's a couple who are buying together for some reason that's deemed to be more secure in the relationship, not falling down. Whereas if it's 4 individuals, for argument's sake, who are got nothing more in common than buying the property, then that relationship, everybody living under one roof, could deteriorate, and the mortgage could become at risk in the people. Somebody says, well, unless so and so happens, I am paying my 500 quid for the month if the mortgage is costing £2,000 a month, for argument's sake.
But that's why it comes back to what you said last time, that it's very important that if you do club together, that you have a contract. Some kind of
you put some documentation in place. The mortgage, of course, the mortgage lender will be aware that it's a group that's buying it, so the mortgage will be set up accordingly. And in that instance, to bear in mind this rule, which is a business rule as well. You're joint and severally responsible for the mortgage. So if there's 4 of you buy together, 2 of you for some reason fall out and say that to hell with that, I'm off, I'm moving out. The other 2 have to pay the mortgage, because they are liable for the mortgage. So it's called you're joint and severally responsible. So that's something to consider. So of course, outside of just the mortgage application, you may want to draw up some house rules. You might draw up a contract, making sure monies are transferred in a timely manner. You might want to set up a joint account that deals with the cost of maintaining the property in regards to utility bills, etc., and the maintenance. So it is taking a common sense approach to these things.
Okay. All right. What we're gonna do? We're gonna have a very short break, and then, like I said, we want to open the live link so people can ask questions.
We are holy, holy, holy. 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 I am 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 holy. You are holy. We are holy. I am holy. Money is coming to me. Money is coming too easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. Money is coming too easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. Every time I open my heart, I receive all that I need. Knowing that God is my source, I relax and let it flow. And I know that money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. I got money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. I got money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. And I have all I need. It's all inside of me. I just ask and let go and let spirit direct the flow. And I know that money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. I got money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. Money is coming to me effortlessly. Money is coming to me. So much money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. I got money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. So much money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. I got money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me. So much money. Money is coming to me easily and effortlessly. Money is coming to me.
Hello, Dougie. Yeah, hi, Duncan. Can you talk or shall I call you back? Yeah, I'm trying to get a
I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so blessed.
Okay, then so the live link number is 07960-239-493. We are speaking of Sister Amani, who speaks to us very shortly. Everyone has a question to Antonio. You had a caller before, so we couldn't take that caller. This is for the live link. So just bear with me, my brother. So couldn't able to speak to you. So the number is 07960-239-493. So those out there who have more than several properties, please share your experience, share your ups and downs. Let's share them on the community, share them on, and let's hear from you, those are out there. And like I said, Anton will be coming here every so often, probably every 2 weeks, it's available for him, and talking about the whole thing about finance, property, first-time buyers,
buy-to-let mortgages,
portfolio and so forth. So we come in and share this information with us, and we need to value this brother, because the brother come on his busy schedule to share this to our people in the community. And also what's very important as well to let people know that he's not here just to comment out. Also he's part of the You'll Find a Voice team with Sean. So he's actually doing workshops. In fact, we need to mention this, Anton, I forget to mention that he actually does the workshops at the Find a Voice event. He's in one of the classes doing workshops, talking about the whole thing about finance and so forth, So as you can see that we're trying to knit things together. Knit things together. Yeah. In fact, why someone's getting us together? Let people know about the event. Antonio, please.
Yes, there's an event on Friday the 19th, 6:30 p.m. till 8:30 p.m., which will be over Southside. It's going to be generational wealth planning, financial awareness, and money mindset, where Sean Freckleton will be speaking on trust, inheritance, tax planning, wealth preservation. Michaela Green will be speaking on investment planning, retirement planning, and protection, and poverty versus prosperity mindset, spirit of abundance, which will be delivered by Anthony Dada, who's a coach and mentor and author, and that's all going to be taking place at the Croydon Supplementary Education Project.
That was the 19th.
On Friday the 19th, which is next week Friday, and the Croydon Supplementary Education Project is at 32 to 42 Sydney Sydenham Road, Croydon. CRO0 2E for Eddie, F for Freddie. You can register by going to www.legacy gr8great.com or by calling 0208 123 8226. We'll repeat that again a little later. You've got a call coming in right now. Yeah.
Sorry, Antonio, I've got a call.
No problem.
Greetings.
Hello, greetings.
Greetings.
How keeping you good?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you.
I know, so you're a fan of Antonio, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, the information and, he just is so, it's always like he's sort of made for radio. He just comes through so clear and so concise, and the message as well.
Very kind of you to say.
Is excellent, yeah.
How can I help? Do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. What I want to ask is, what would you say is the best way to start getting young people prepared for getting their first-time mortgage?
Okay, it is a little bit as I was saying earlier on, and in fact, while we were on the break, I just was going to say to Brother Dougie, that I just need to step back for a moment. In actual fact, I would say today that the best place to start is actually go and see a mortgage broker or a financial advisor. So that you can have an initial conversation to set out a plan of action over, say, 18 months, 2 years. And that plan of action does depend on where you are at that point in regards to your credit file, your commitments, and your employment. Because when you're buying for residential purposes, everything is based upon your commitments and your your actual income. So I would say today that's the starting point. Identify a independent mortgage broker, independent financial advisor, not a bank or a building society. Go and see them, sit with them for a couple of hours, do what we call it is an initial fact find, so that you've got somebody and you've then given some guidance based specifically on your circumstances as to what you need to go out and do to prepare yourself. I was saying earlier that one of the things is you need to be very aware as a first-time buyer, not just as a first-time buyer, but everyone, but as we're talking specifically about first-time buyers today, is your Experian and Equifax credit files, your current commitments, and also what your goals, dreams, and ambitions are. So that's why I would say you would start there with a suitable advisor. Does that help with your question? Or were you looking for a bit more than that?
Yeah, very useful. I know you're talking about first-time mortgage purchasers, but I was just wondering as well, if a young person had the ambition to maybe stay at home, but then to start off as a buy-to-let. Great question. Person, because that's kind of really what is at the back of my mind.
Yes, and that is in actual fact leads very nicely into one of the bits that I was going to continue after taking your question, is for young people to consider as a way into the property onto the property ladder is two things. One is to consider buying outside of the Greater London area. For the purposes of the fact that property prices will be cheaper, deposits required will be less, and yes, you would have a vehicle, referring to the property as the vehicle. You will then have an investment vehicle that's growing based upon what's happening to property prices. So one of the ways you can develop money for the future to use as a deposit is through that property going up in value, and you being able to access some of that value at some point in the future. When dealing specifically with buying something as a buy-to-let, it can be done, not as simply as it used to be able to be done, because these days a lot of lenders are concerned that the person who's buying as a first-time buyer and a first-time landlord, some of them stipulate that first-time landlord must have a residential mortgage. And the reason for that is that they don't want that property to be being bought and for that person to then go and live in it, because the mortgage on a buy-to-let is based on the rental income. So when you get the mortgage, it's based on that paying it. If you then, if that person then moves in there and gets into problems with paying the mortgage, then there'll be issues. So that's why they're asked. They most of them stipulate that you must have a residential mortgage, so they know that you've got somewhere to live and you're not trying to sneak through the back door because you don't have enough income to get a residential mortgage. You're trying to sneak through the back door using rental income to say that you've got enough, you can service the mortgage on a monthly basis, and that's part of why that criteria is there. However, there are lenders who will look at you as a first-time landlord who's also a first-time buyer. These are specialist lenders. These are not your high street lenders. Again, why you would need to go to a broker, because these are specialist lenders that we refer to as centralized lenders or specialist lenders. Some of them are owned by high street names, but you will never have heard of them. So they do exist. Of course, the other way you can do it, as you've just said, is in terms of getting a foot on the ladder, is potentially looking at buying an investment property with somebody who already has a mortgage. So you could potentially do that with a mum or a dad, or with parents, or with a brother or a sister. So this is all part and parcel of what I had jotted down or made a note in my head in terms of thinking creatively about how you can
I was about to say that. I was about to say creative, because it's not good that young people are not able to get on that. So whatever way, so that's really good what you said. Thank you very much.
Indeed, and we've got to get away from focusing on the only way to get a deposit and the only way to get on the property ladder is by saving a deposit. That's what mainstream media kicks out all the time. The big challenge is people can't save a deposit. Well, we're at that point where, yes, if you're looking to achieve that just through savings, it is going to be challenging. So we have to look at, well, what else can be done? How else can you do it? So part of that is what I've just said. Part of it is buying outside London. I'm going to be doing a bit of work in terms of crunching some numbers, because I think we've got to a point where it might even be necessary to look abroad, to be buying abroad again. So you're putting in place things that will create money for you. It's not just about your blood, sweat and tears going to work 9 to 5, 40 hours a week to earn enough money to be able to save some money and perhaps live a bit of a frugal life for a couple of years in order to achieve that. Nothing wrong with doing that in order to achieve an ambition, but at the same time, if you can put other things in place by thinking a little bit creatively, that can create and generate wealth for you in the meantime until you can buy that ideal first property that you want to move into, then that's what we need to be looking at. So part of that is investments. Even when it comes to savings, it may be advised, it may be that one starts looking at not just savings institutions in the UK. In terms of here at the present time in the UK, you're going to struggle to perhaps get 1.5% per annum on money that you're holding in an account. Whereas there are other parts of the world where there are developing economies where money on deposit, which is what a savings account is, you're leaving your money with an institution, will pay maybe 10% per annum. Yes, you have to look at the fact that you are investing, and I'm saying investing in those organisations I'm thinking of would have offices in London. So I'm not saying invest overseas. So even if you look at some of the Caribbean building science societies and banks, etc., that have got offices in the UK, they're paying much better rates. Now, their laws and regulations are going to be very, very similar to London in terms of the protections that are available. As I say, this is something that I've recently been looking around. I haven't done all the relevant research and number crunching as yet, but I do know that you can look abroad. So it's yes, that's savings, but it's just thinking about it in a different way. You've got to make that money work as hard as it possibly can. and as long as you take the relevant advice and see that the protections are there. Here in the UK, if you've got money in a bank or building society, and that bank or building society goes bust, that you'll be compensated up to £85,000 of that money. So if you've got 100 grand in there, you'd lose 15 grand, but you're guaranteed to get 85 grand of that money made available to you through a government compensation scheme.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's making sure that there's similar sort of protections elsewhere if you look outside of the UK.
Wow, thank you very much. Great answer.
Right.
Hopefully that was helpful.
Lots of it's just lots of different ways of looking at the situation. So, and that's what I really wanted to know. Was there other ways of looking at young people getting on the ladder? And you definitely have answered that question. Thank you so much.
Part of what can be done, listener, part of what we're looking at, and part of, as Brother Sean said, why am I doing that all of a sudden, Dougie? As Brother Dougie said earlier, working with Sean Freckleton, where we're looking at the wealth preservation, part of what I started and the conversation with as well is talking to that generation, i.e. parents, etc., in terms of bringing legacy forward. How can they use assets that they've already got to make money available now to help the children and possibly grandchildren in some instances to get that foot on the ladder, and do that as part and parcel of preserving their wealth, so that, but as opposed to waiting 20 or 30 years for these individuals to be able to access that wealth, what we're actively doing now is working with that generation to bring some of that legacy, that wealth forward into the present day and making that available as well as deposits as well. So there's lots of ways. I say lots of ways. I guess what I'm trying to impart today is don't think about this just from the point of view of going to work and then saving.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, you definitely answered the question.
You seem to be very passionate for young people. Why is that?
Sorry, say that again, Brother
You seem to
Dougie.
be very passionate. You seem to have a passion for young people to get involved in buying their own property. Why is that?
You're asking me why am I passionate about young people?
In terms of them buying a property, is what Dougie's saying.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and certainly because there's younger members in my family. I've got granddaughters, and I remember what it's like when I bought my first home, and I want them to have the same opportunity. So, and I think it's very important. It's sort of it's an asset. It doesn't you buy a car, it depreciates. You buy clothes, name brands, as young people like to buy, and I really would like to see them spending more time investing in long-term things like property. So, and my oldest granddaughter at the moment, she's up for it. She is talking in that way, and she does understand, that she should be thinking long-term, even though she's only 18 at the moment.
Excellent.
So that's where my passion lies. Obviously, you want to see the next generation do, as well or even better than yourself. So, and obviously with the way things are going, you hear so many, people are saying, "Oh, young people can't get on the ladder." So, just wanted to know if there was any.
That's why I thought I'd take this afternoon. I'd take it as an opportunity to try and focus on that. How the young people, the first-time buyers, can start looking at how they get onto the ladder, so they're not so despondent. There's a lot of despondency in the community and in the media about how they present this. What it calls for is a little bit of thinking laterally as to how we can approach it differently. Great that your daughter's having that conversation with you. It's part of what I'm encouraging the community to do, is to start talking about financial matters on a regular basis at Sunday dinner. Talk about these things. It will become less alien. It will become less daunting. It will seem less complicated because a conversation's taking place. And what happens is over a period of time, a picture starts to develop. Little bits fill in. It's just like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. And and through the conversation, the jigsaw puzzle will become more complete, and they'll be more able, as a community, and more aware as to how to approach these things. So great that you're doing that with your daughter. Hope listeners are listening to you and they will adopt the same thing and have these conversations. And it is about us thinking laterally. And yes, for this generation to perhaps do what I think you're alluding to, and what I believe in, is that each generation, to add value to my life, my sons have to achieve more than I did, to supersede what I've done, because otherwise what was my time about? So that's how I tend to see it.
So that again, I like what you said there, though.
They have to. We as parents should be gratified that our children supersede all that we achieve in our life, because that's, for me, is what places value on my life. If I repeated my father's life, then what was his life about? And that's how I tend to see it. So, but the difference here is, I think, as the elders, grandparents and parents like myself, is a little bit different than when I started out 40 years ago and bought my first property. We are now looking at a situation where we've got to actually reach in, and we're going to have to help more than was necessary 40 years ago when I started. It's a very, very different world. So I think it's incumbent upon us as well, as elders and the seniors in the community, to look at how can we help them beyond just savings. And unfortunately, we won't have time to go into today as well. The other thing to look at is what I'm very much pushing is multi-generational homes, which is where more than one generation come together to buy a large enough property that you can live as a unit within that property. And I can blow you away with some figures that I've done, but I know we're now short for time.
We're short. In fact, we're just over time.
We're over time. That is a consideration. Instead of going out and being first-time buyers, get together, brothers, sisters, parents who've already got assets or already got a property. Look at how that can be restructured to make the deposit available to buy a big enough house. And I won't point any fingers, but if we look around and look at some other ethnic minorities, you will see that that's what's done, and that's what catapults them so far ahead of us.
Okay, I'm just conscious.
Very conscious at the time. So
we're getting a listener for 3 minutes.
That's a great idea as well, because that's how I was brought up. My mother and father and my grandmother, they all, that's how they did it back in. Because my parents were very young and they wanted to get on the ladder, and they bought their first property at the age of 18, 19, something like that.
Okay.
So that is like going back in time and picking things up.
I just have to interject, because we're literally running over time, about nearly 4 minutes over time. We'll do another show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Bye-bye.
On another occasion, we'll do multi-generational homes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
all right.
Give thanks. Okay, I'm just looking at about 4 minutes over time. So. So what we're going to do here, Antonio, first we have to give thanks for you coming in.
Pleasure.
And if we said that you'll be coming in 2 weeks' time and continue the whole, what do you want to do in 2 weeks' time there? You want to touch on?
If listeners, if you get feedback, we can press on with something else, a different subject matter. I can lead from this one into, say, multi-generational homes and how to perhaps approach that, and the pros and cons of taking that on board. Or we can have a chat off here as to what once in a few days' time, when you've had some feedback from the listeners, to see if there's anything in specific that they'd like me to deal with.
Right. I just said that Antonio is a man, he just know where my door. So Antonio, we'll leave everything to you, because
what I'd like to do is try and take the listeners on a journey in a sequential way. So I thought it was a good place to start where we started today.
Okay, we got a DJ right. I know he's right behind
the door now.
Step in the door.
So we have to step out. Brother Dougie, thank you for having me on the show once again.
Good time.